Welcome everybody, Hare Krishna, and to another Prabhupada Memoirs. I'm so happy that you're all here today when I'm talking to His Grace Ranchor Prabhu, who is a direct disciple of Srila Prabhupada. And we'll be talking about so many things, about his life with Srila Prabhupada coming to London. And also, if you don't know, he is known, this is Ranchor Prabhu, is known for his books, the books he's written. Some of those books I'm going to just say now. Bhagavad-Gita talks between the soul and God, the birth of Kirtan. We got Ramayana, he even wrote, the 8 elements, the Prince of Dharma, when the sun shines, you can see that in the bottom right-hand corner by him. Vedic theology, we got Hinduism and ecology, and many, many more. But if you want to check any of his books, just go to Amazon and you can find them by putting in Rancho Prime. And guess what? Wow, already 240 of you have joined. Really, thank you so much. Thank you for being online. Remember, this is your chance to ask questions as well to Prabhu. So this is your time. And I just want to say a very nice, what's it called? Welcome. Warm welcome.
I'm amazed that 200 people could spare the time, but I'm very grateful and I look forward to connecting with you.
Well, it's going up and we're getting individuals. Yeah, we got comments coming through as well. Hare Krishna from different people. But I just want to start off, Prabhu, if I may, with yourself, regards to your connection. First of all, you've been in Krishna consciousness now for many, many years, before people were born, with some people here. And I want to know your connection. How did you start in Krishna consciousness? What was that journey like?
Well, the first time I consciously saw a picture of Krishna was an unusual version of Krishna. Actually, it was on the cover of an album there was a rock band called Quintessence.
Wow.
And on the cover they had a picture of Krishna. You could tell it was Krishna because he had a peacock feather, and I guess it was tilak, and he was blue, but he was sitting cross-legged, sort of in meditation, beautifully painted. And that was an album of Quintessence. They were a very popular band in sort of 1969. And one of the songs on that album was called Jesus, Buddha, Moses, Gauranga.
Ah.
So I had no idea who Gauranga was, but it sounded like an attractive name. So I was living with a friend of mine in near Chelsea in London, and I was just starting my new year at Chelsea Art College. And one day he came, he brought a picture of a spiritual teacher, a guru. It was Srila Prabhupada. Very striking picture. Prabhupada looked so grave and so full of divine authority. So we put that picture on the wall. And the other thing he did was we were in Chelsea, so he went for the day down to Southall, where all the Indian community lived. In those days, that was their place.
Yep.
Still is, but now, of course, they've gone up in the world. And in the market there, he bought a poster. He bought 2 posters, actually. And they both showed divine beings who were blue. And so he assumed that they were both Krishna. So he brought these 2 home. And he said, I've got one for each of us. We can each have one by our bed, you know. And he said, which one do you want? And I said, well, they're both very attractive. I think I probably liked that one, and that one was a blue young man, beautiful young man, and he was playing a flute.
Okay. Something
And
like behind here.
the other one was also a blue personality who was sitting down in meditation with his arm. I don't know if you can see, his arm was sort of resting on a support with
Yeah.
some little black beads, and there was a crescent moon in his hair, and the white representing the Gandhi. So he said that, oh, that's brilliant, because and that one had this kind of mark on it.
Shiva. It sounds like Shiva, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
So he said, "Oh, I was hoping you'd want the one with the flute, because I want the one, the other one." He was spontaneously attracted to Shiva, and I was spontaneously attracted to Krishna. So I think that's the first time I can actually remember consciously seeing an image of Krishna. I may have before, but anyway, I had just turned 20, I guess. I just turned 20. And the reason we had moved into that flat on the edge of Chelsea, between Chelsea and Fulham, was because Mick was starting in the city. He's going to climb the ladder there. His dad was a very successful businessman. And I was just about to start a painting diploma course at Chelsea. And so we already had it in mind. I had never been to the temple, but Mick had. And he said, "These are fantastic people. You'll love it, Richard." That was my name. And so we decided what we'll do is we'll get this flat in Chelsea, and 2 or 3 evenings a week, the temple was open Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then the Sunday feast. So on Monday, Wednesday, Friday evenings, or in the mornings, we will go to the temple. That was our decision down in Sussex. We talked about it. So that's why we were there. So that's the first time I saw a picture of Krishna. However, my meeting with Prabhupada was in retrospect, it was a very mystical affair. A year earlier, I had just passed the age of, I was just 19. And I was staying, I'd left home, but during the summer, I was staying in our home in Sussex, and my father was also there. Both of us were we were not settled. He was on the way out of his marriage with my mother, and I was on the way out. I was going to leave the house and go back up to London. And we used to watch in the evening a discussion program every evening called Late Night Lineup.
Okay.
Now, in those days, BBC and ITV were the only 2 channels. And there was one ITV channel, and BBC had just started BBC 2, the second channel. It only broadcast for a few hours in the evening, and it was kind of cultural. It was, for the more discerning audience. And the Late Night Lineup was an arts and, mainly an arts program. But they would have interesting discussions about ideas about the world and so on. So all of a sudden, sitting there on the chair was this divine-looking elderly Indian man, swathed in robes, and the program presenter began to interview this, and I was thinking, who is this man? It's totally unusual to have someone like this on Late Night Lineup. It was usually trendy people, famous playwrights or actors or actresses or filmmakers or whatever. And so he introduced this man, it was Prabhupada, I had no idea then, that he has he's just arrived in this country and he's staying with John Lennon.
Oh, okay.
John Lennon, for those who know, is one of the 4 original Beatles, and he was the one mostly who got all the credit. Later on, people discovered George Harrison. But so John Lennon, and Prabhupada was staying with him, apparently, and he and his disciples have just released a record. So anyhow, he turned to Prabhupada and he asked him, "Why have you come?" And Prabhupada immediately answered, "I've come to teach about God." And my ears pricked up, because as soon as he began to speak, I could see this is a man of deep wisdom and authority and authenticity. I had trouble to understand what he was saying, because he spoke to my ears with quite a thick Indian accent. But he spoke only, few words. There was no, Prabhupada, on all these sort of occasions, he would speak, a brief sentence to the point. He would not elaborate on things. He always gave very direct, to the point answers. So he said, "I've come to teach about God." And the interviewer said, "Well, which God is this? Is this a different God? We already have God in our Christian church." And Prabhupada says, "Same God. God has many names," and he must have mentioned, Krishna. And so then the interviewer asked him, "Well, what is it you're going to teach that we don't already have?" And Prabhupada said, "I've come to teach you how you can talk with God, just as you and I are speaking, face to face." And when I heard that, I thought, wow, this is extraordinary. Then the interviewer asked my question for me. He said, "Well, how are you going to do that?" And the answer came by chanting the name of God. And when I heard that, I thought, did I hear that right? Because surely it can't be that simple. And I turned to my father, who was watching the program alongside me, and I said, "Did he just say by chanting God's name?" My father said, "I don't know." And so then Tony Bilbo, his name is etched in my memory, because he was the one who presented the program and interviewed Prabhupada. He said, "Would you like to demonstrate?" Now, up to that point, Prabhupada had been very grave, full of weight, just like he says, guru means heavy. But when that question when he was invited, "Would you like to demonstrate?" he lit up like a beacon, this huge smile on his face, and his eyes sparkled. He said, "Yes." And so he immediately got up, and they both walked across the studio, and there were a few devotees. And among them, I particularly remember, was Shamsundar.
Oh.
Yeah. He made an impression on me. So they were sitting on the floor, and Prabhupada sat on the floor with them. He joined them. They were sitting in a little sort of half circle on the floor of a studio. And nobody ever sits on a studio floor, but they did. And the interviewer sort of bent over, with his microphone, poking it in their faces, and sort of said, he interviewed Shamsundar. And I was very struck, by this tall, angular American man with a clean shaven head, and a huge pair of lines, the tilak, going all with Shamsundar, like this, all the way from there to his seeker. And I thought, when I heard him answer, he said, "Why are you doing this?" And he gave 1 or 2 words. I thought, that man that's what I would like to be. I would love to be like him and do what he's doing, but I don't think I'd ever have the courage to do that. So then they began to sing. Yamuna was there. She had the harmonium, and I don't recall exactly, but I would imagine she might have led the singing. I'm not sure if Prabhupada did or she did. And Prabhupada had kartals. And so they sang the Hare Krishna mantra. As soon as I heard that sound, I thought immediately, yes, that's what he said. You just chant the name of God. And I was just drinking in that sound and just swimming in it, and it stopped. The program ended. It was faded out after one mantra. And I turned to my father and I said, "Wasn't that amazing?" And he said, "No." Didn't touch him at all.
But it touched you. It touched you.
Yeah. Although it was after that, it was another, because I started up at Chelsea at the art college, and I had an exciting year actually. So somehow or another, it wasn't until a year later that I actually got into the company of the devotees with my friend Mick. We went, the first time I walked in the temple was a Sunday evening, because he told me about the Sunday feast. And so when we got there, in the very place temple, you came in the hallway, and the door into the temple room itself had a glass panel, beautiful oval glass panel, created by Shamsundar. So I appeared through the glass panel, and I saw the room was kind of half full. There were 20 or so people there. And I thought, I don't think I want to just walk in there. I was quite a shy young man. So Mick said, "Well, that's okay. Well, let's go downstairs." So we went downstairs to what was the Prasadam Room, and there was Yamuna, Prabhupada's first female disciple, I guess she'd say. Well, her and her sister Janaki joined together in New York in 1967, or 66 perhaps it was. And Yamuna was, she came across to London with part of the original group of 6.5 with a baby. She was down there, and we walked in, and she recognized Mick. She'd already, so she said, "Oh, hi, Mick." And Mick said, "This is my friend, Richard." And so, she was very pleased to meet me. And she said, "Why don't you boys help?" Because she was laying out the Sunday feast on plates. So I helped Yamuna. And after we'd made up the plates, they were small paper plates, but she was very, very excellent at producing, food. Years later, Yamuna published her cookbook, which became a bestseller in America. So there was a sort of a samosa, a pakora, a little bit of sabji and a puri, and there would have been a sweet of some kind. So once we'd said, so she said, "Oh, now you boys you help. So now have a plate each." So we sat there tasting the prasadam. Now I grew up as a Roman Catholic, with what we call the Holy Communion or Eucharist, it's called, which is the sacred bread, and the idea that it's sacred food was not foreign to me. And I immediately could sense this food is sacred. And so I didn't just, plow into it. I took it delicately, and I was savoring it and thinking, my gosh, this is so special. So while I was doing that, in walked Shamsundar. I recognized him straight away. That's the guy I saw on the TV last year. And Michael, I think, introduced me to Shamsundar, and Shamsundar sat with us, and I had a lovely sort of interaction with him. So those two devotees, within 2 weeks, they'd both gone to India. But I really felt connected through them. And within a week, I decided I've got to be with these people. And I thought to myself, I can't, why is it? I just have to be with these people. And the background to that is that although I was only just 20 at that point, I just had my 20th birthday, I couldn't really see anything in this world that I wanted. I thought I would like to make some beautiful art. But even that, I wasn't, when I looked around at what was fashionably being painted in those days, it didn't appeal to me so much, I knew lots of artists. I used to meet them in Fulham and Chelsea. And of course, I had admiration for them. But somehow I felt there's something beyond this that I'm looking for. So I was ready, looking for an alternative. And the other thing that really puzzled me, I thought, why am I so attracted to this man, because although Prabhupada, I didn't meet Prabhupada till the following summer, but he was present everywhere. His tapes, his singing and his words were constantly playing throughout the building. Wherever you went, there was Prabhupada in your ear. And of course, we were studying his books, but perhaps especially because his early disciples who'd come over from America had lived with him and had such intimate contact with him. They were always talking about him. Oh, with such love. So I thought, why is it I'm so attracted to this man and I feel such trust in him? And why is it I'm attracted to this image of Krishna? I'd always believed in God all my life, but I never encountered this idea of God as a blue boy who dances in the forest, and plays a flute with his friends. Why do I feel so attracted to this? And the only conclusion I could come to, because I'd always actually just spontaneously believed in reincarnation. So I thought, I must know this man, Prabhupada, and I must have encountered Krishna in some previous lifetime. That's the only thing I could conclude. That's why I feel so attracted. And it was on the basis of that. I mentioned that to one or two of the devotees. And they show, and Dhananjaya, I particularly remember, who was about to become the president of the temple. He explained to me that, well, actually, Richard, this is what Krishna says in the Gita, that if you are attracted, if you set out on this path, but you didn't complete the journey, then in your next life, you'll continue. Yeah.
So that put it together for you then. One thing I found amazing is when you were first having prasadam, it's like, I'm sure those that are logged in, first time they had prasadam, oh, that looks nice, let's have it. No, the aspect of savoring comes later, but for you straight away from the start, I'm going to savor this. I'm going to, really, and that's that. So that aspect of honoring prasadam seem to have innately just come from your Christian background when you're talking about taking the breaking of the bread.
I think so. I mean, for me, it was a continuous journey. It's not that I suddenly, one day I stopped being a Christian and started to become a Krishna devotee. The two merged. And so, because I already was familiar with the idea of sacred food, sacred bread. But I thought, this is like, it's expanded. It's not just sacred bread, it's a sacred multi-course meal.
Full meal. It's like, God, this is not bad. This is okay. This is evolution going on here from the bread. But there's one aspect that's, when I've been speaking to you, that comes out very clear to me. Your respect and admiration for all things nature and natural and things around you, and this persona, especially about the environment and of course the Hinduism and ecology, the book that you brought out. Where did this aspect of nature, and how do you feel like with devotees, those things that you've learned on the way, and Srila Prabhupada's thoughts about nature as well, how has that instilled and still carrying on in your life right now?
Well, I grew up in the countryside, and I used to spend days on end just wandering, It's not that I had like a scientific botanical interest. I was never really that way inclined, but I just loved to be in nature. That's where I felt, I think, most connected with the divine. So when I joined the temple, of course, it was in the middle of London, and there wasn't a whole lot of discussion, really, not very much about nature, but I picked it up. I was sensitive to it. And so, when Krishna says in the Bhagavad-Gita, I am the taste in water, I am the fragrance of the earth, I'm the light of the sun. And I particularly loved the idea that Krishna lives in the forest. And so I started to look at trees in a completely different way. I somewhere in his books, Prabhupada occasionally mentions, that a tree is a living being. So I picked up on that. And whenever I got the chance, if I was in the park, or I remember once I had to drive out of London to collect something. I was one of the few devotees, by the way, that could drive. I think I was practically the only one with a driving license. So I drove the temple van to collect some items, and I stopped outside of the city. I pulled in, and I sort of climbed over a gate, and I went up to a tree, and I hugged the tree. I thought, now I can understand. You are an eternal being. Thank you so much. That was just I had that always that sort of feeling.
Yeah. And how did you find coming into Krishna consciousness, this aspect of, because of course in other faiths there's this aspect of even meat eating's there, etc., but then of course you come into Krishna consciousness, vegetarian food, etc., or were you always into the vegetarian aspect from
yeah, well, that's a funny thing, because one of my sisters had a friend, a girl, who used to come and stay with us, and she was vegetarian, and we used to sometimes discuss it, and I thought it was a bit silly, it was a bit girlish, to not want to examine this. I remember thinking that when I was about 14 or 15. However, go forward to the age of 19, and my friend Mick, before we ever went up to London, he stayed overnight, and in the morning I said to him, would you like, bacon and eggs for breakfast? And Mick looked at me with sort of horror. You mean you eat meat? Man, that's really not spiritual. And instantly I thought, of course it's not. I'd never really thought of it, but I understood immediately. I said, Mick, from this day, I'm not eating meat. So I was already vegetarian. Yeah. But what surprised me was when I decided to become a vegetarian, I thought, this is fantastic, because now I'm going to turn all my friends onto it as well. And, there was no internet in those days. There was no awareness of these things at all. Nobody was talking about it. So I thought, I'm going to tell all my friends, become vegetarian. We don't have to eat meat. We don't have to eat animals. But of course, none of them agreed. They all thought I was loony. So when I met the devotees, of course, that was another reason that these are my people. These are my people. They have devotion for God. They sing God's names, and I'd grown up singing. I've been a choir boy and all of that. I was deeply loved to sing to God. So these are my people, and on top of all that, they're vegetarian, and they believe in reincarnation, and they believe in beauty, because Krishna is beautiful, and I've always believed in beauty.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, it's something. It's lovely to hear how devotees, how it evolved, and for you, it seems you take to things very quickly. You like think about it, and that's it. Okay, this is the right way. That's quite inspiring.
Yeah. Well, of course, when you're 19, or just past my 20th birthday, when I met the devotee, it's easy. Decide to do something, you just do it. I never felt constrained by any sort of, ambitions in this world to make money or have a career. I had friends who were like that, and I thought, that's crazy. Just live each day, and appreciate the world. That was my intention always.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I want to just bring, of course, you got to see Prabhupada, and you took initiation.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think in some sense, my initiation was that first encounter although it was on the airwaves only, on the television, but it turned into a very strong connection. And then around the time when I joined, just when I was on the cusp of joining the temple, I had a very powerful dream of Prabhupada. I'd never, I had no familiarity. I'd never seen really any pictures beyond that one that Mick had put on the wall. And in my dream, I saw, I was on the south bank of the Thames, and across on the north bank, I saw a whole cluster of Krishna devotees dancing and singing. And in the middle, there was this saintly man. I knew it was Prabhupada sitting on a throne. And I've never seen that before, but he was sitting on a big throne, surrounded by all these adoring, singing devotees. And suddenly, it's a dream, right? So suddenly there was a bridge, and I ran across the bridge and dived into Prabhupada's lap. And he embraced me and rubbed my head and so on. So that was, it was a year before I met him in the flesh. But that felt very real. And I would like to say to anyone, who's listening, that to experience the presence of Prabhupada doesn't require to physically be in his presence. It's a spiritual dimension completely. And I have witnessed on on a good number of occasions, I've witnessed devotees who never met Prabhupada speak about it with such feeling, sometimes with tears in their eyes. I've seen that. And I know it's real. It's real. It does not require, whereas there were many who had his physical company, and somehow or another, it never really came alive. It's the case.
Wow.
Yeah, it's all in the heart. That's what I would say.
So that means that's hope for all of us now.
Absolutely.
Through the books and everything that Srila Prabhupada has left us.
Yeah.
And the association of direct disciples as such as yourself. We can.
Well, that's also true in the sense that, long before I met Prabhupada, I mean, it was I don't know, 10 months before I met him after I moved into the temple. But I felt his presence very strongly because the senior most, Shamsundar and Yamuna and Gurudas and Malati, they went to India within a couple of weeks of my joining. But Mukunda was still there. Mukunda Goswami, he is now. And Dhananjaya, who'd had Prabhupada's company, he was there. But through them, I felt very much Prabhupada's presence. And he used to, we got letters from him every month or so. A letter would arrive, and whoever got the letter, it didn't matter. It was everyone's. And we'd read it out together. And
We've got here, somebody said, when you just said, Prabhupada the King, beautiful dream. Again, some really lovely comments coming through.
Yeah.
There's a few lovely comments I've just been seeing through, but this is just to take us through, again, the nature aspect of yourself. And then I want to come on to some of your books, if it's okay. But this one, Hare Krishna Ranchor Prabhu, please do share with us your project of planting trees in Vrindavan. Many thanks, Chudamani.
Chudamani, yeah. Thank you, Chudamani. Well, of course, that was years later in the journey of life. I once asked Prabhupada, how do you choose your service, in Krishna's service? At the time, I was trying to make up my mind whether to stay in Notting Hill Gate, where I had a preaching centre.
Okay, yes.
Or to go back up to Manchester, where I had previously opened a centre, but it had to close. And I was trying to think, which should I do? And I asked Prabhupada about it, and he gave kind of, inconclusive answers. He didn't want to say, you must do this, So I said to him, Prabhupada, when there's a choice to be made in Krishna's service, how do I choose? And Prabhupada immediately just shot back like he did, usually. Choice? You have no choice. You do what Krishna gives you. So I mentioned that because years later, in the late 80s, actually, I had a colleague I was working with, and we were running an international environmental project, connecting religions with the environment. And so I got commissioned to write a book, and you've got it on the screen, actually, that book, Hinduism and Ecology. I was at the end of 80, it was in 89, I was commissioned by the Worldwide Fund for Nature WWF, to write that book. And that involved traveling to India. The idea was I would collect a set of sort of statements from different well-known Hindu people. So actually what I did was I did my own thing. I did go and interview these. I decided on about 4 or 5, interesting individuals. Oh gosh, I can't remember the names of them all now. It's all so long ago. But there was the tree-hugging man who was famous for what was called the Chipko movement.
Okay.
The way he traveled, his name will come to me, but he traveled the length of the Himalayas, getting tribes people to protect their trees, and he came up with this idea of tree hugging.
Tree hugging. That's where we get the word tree hugger.
I guess. So Sundarlal Bahuguna, that was his name. So I pinned him down, and so I wrote a chapter about him. I told his story, and I passed on some of his comments and his ideas, and I did the same with 4 or 5 significant individuals, and I told their stories. So that was the middle of the book, and the first part of the book was my own exploration of the Vedic teachings on ecology. I'd always wanted to do that. Right? I'd always wanted to do it, but I never felt that I was sort of been qualified or capable to write a book about that. But I'd always thought I would love to do that. And then just on a plate, this commission came through my friend. He said, would you like to write a book about Hinduism and ecology? So, and then the third part of that, so this is Krishna. You see, Prabhupada says you just do what Krishna gives you. So Krishna gave me that. And the third part of the book developed in the process of writing, of meeting these people. I discussed it with my friend in Manchester that we could do something to restore the forests of Krishna in Vrindavan, because they are being destroyed and they're so special. If we could do something there to connect in people's minds that if you love Krishna, then love his forests also. It's no good just building temples of brick and stone. Krishna has his temple, which is the living forest. That's Krishna's temple. So we started a project, and we managed to get funding from Geneva, WWF in Geneva, and we got it going. And so the third part of that book, Hinduism and Ecology, I told the story of how we started that project and got people involved. And although I couldn't really sustain it, I used to go every year, all through the 90s. I went to India twice a year, spent a month or 2 every time in Vrindavan and Delhi, meeting people and trying to get support. And in the end, it was a bit too much for me. If I had actually moved to India and lived there, I could have done something. But by visiting, you're just an observer, really. But what happened is it seeded 1 or 2 other projects, and there's something called the Braj Foundation now, and there's other groups, and they're doing serious work to try to. There's not a lot. Well, just to try to halt the destruction. But even the destruction is going at such a rapid pace all over India, of the destruction of nature, and including in Vrindavan. Yeah.
Wow.
But we did get funding, and I think it helped just to raise some awareness. Yeah.
That's and it's nice how this idea, this concept helped to seed, like you said, these other organizations like the Braj Foundation. So, and of course, save Yamuna River as well. That's another thing. With this pandemic, what's happened, it feels that yes, there's some highs and lows, but the highs was that the pollution had reduced and it helped to cleanse away certain aspects. So, it's nice how nature works in this type of equilibrium with things happening. So thank you for sharing. And if there's anybody that wants to get involved with any what you're hearing, then please, I'll be sharing Ranchor Prabhu's at the bottom. You'll see scrolling through the screen his YouTube channel where you can connect. You can connect via his email address he's given, ranchorprime@gmail.com. Feel free to connect. I want to also bring on the point about, because like I mentioned at the start, books, like they say, books are the basis. And for you, it seems to be the case because of the amount of you've written. You're on Wikipedia as well, where they talk about you, Ranchor Prabhu. And another aspect that you mentioned when we were talking is this book, When the Sun Shines, and how important this book is actually for devotees. If and I like, just if you can, just a little bit about the book, why the essence is so close to your heart, because of course I can see Srila Prabhupada on it, but why is it so essence close to your heart, and how we can take advantage of reading this book.
Yeah. Please. Well, this book is the story of Krishna coming to this country. And because the International Krishna Consciousness Movement, it took birth in America, and the leadership, by and large, has mostly been American. And, naturally, the dominant story is coming through them. Increasingly, that will change. It is changing. But I felt this British story needs to be told, not the least because it's of interest to everyone, but also for those who take to Krishna here in this country. We need to know our background, how Krishna came to be here. So I was waiting, actually, in my naivety, perhaps, I thought somebody else will write that book. But after sort of 20, I started writing this book around about the year 2000, I think. Well, I can't even remember now. When was it published? Let me just see. I've got a copy here. It was... oh gosh, no
2009 was it? Illustrated.
Yeah. So I started writing it in the early 2000s, but wow. To do that, I had to raise funds. I first had to persuade the BBT, and then I had to persuade ISKCON in England, and between them, they stumped up a decent sum, which I thought, well, that's enough at least to get into, because it takes a long time, a book like this. I interviewed 80 people. In the end, I had to do my own fundraising and to get double the amount from just contacts and friends. So basically, I took somewhere between 3 and 4 years to produce this book. And it was, it consumed me completely to tell this story. And I decided at a certain point, as I was gathering more and more interviews and interviewing people, recording them and then transcribing, I had a lot of material. I thought to myself, well, how am I going to tell this? How am I going to pass this information on? And I decided, well, first of all, it has to be a story. I don't want it to be a historical sort of piece of analysis and, drawing conclusions and philosophizing. I just want to tell a story. So I looked around. As a writer, one tends to do this. What's a good example of the kind of book I want to produce? And I came across, and this is the thing, I can never, my memory these days, it never works. Schindler's Ark. Was it called? Yeah, Schindler's List. They made a film of it.
Schindler's List.
Okay, that's the film. The book was called Schindler's Ark. And it was written by an Australian man who traveled the world. He was sort of an international writer, and he'd started out as a journalist. And it is the story of the survival of roughly 80. There were more than 80, but he chose roughly 80 Jewish people who lived in who got through the Holocaust. And the man who saved their lives, he saved the lives of thousands of people, was called Schindler. He was a German businessman, owned factories. So he employed them in his factories, and somehow he managed to rescue them. So he told that as a story. And his story, although it was history, it was a story. You were in the moment, and you met 80 individuals, and it won the Booker Prize, and eventually actually won the Booker Prize of the decade. Wow. So I thought, let me have a look at that. And that's what I chose. I thought, in telling this story of how Prabhupada came to England and rescued, actually he initiated in Britain 300 devotees. That's 100 women and 200 men. There is a database. You can check it all out. And I've included all those names at the back of the book. So I, of course, knew many of those devotees, and men and women, and I found as many as I could. Of course, I couldn't include everyone, but I interviewed them and I included their stories. And I thought, what about my story? Because I was, involved from the beginning. But I thought, I made a decision that no, I can't include myself, because that will, it'll shift the whole sort of voice and so on. I'm the storyteller. So I told the story without analysis, without comment, without opinion. I just let the story speak for itself. And of course, Prabhupada is at the heart of the whole story. It actually begins with Shamsundar. It's dedicated to Yamuna and Prabhupada, because those are two people that had profound influence on me. So I do recommend it wholeheartedly, not because it's my book. I don't possess it. It belongs to the BBT. I don't make a penny from, you buying the book. But I want this book to everyone be familiar with that story, because it is an amazing story. It's a wonderful story, and it's a heart-moving story. Yeah.
So on that basis, so I've had Narmada Tank is saying, from where can I get this book when the sun shines? Yeah. So there's a flavor, like we just said, there's the BBT. So knock on the BBT in your local area, see if they've got copies. Also Amazon, there is a few copies, but you have to be quick.
You can definitely get it on Amazon, even if they say there's not many copies. Just place an order and it'll come through eventually. But there's, as far as I know, there's a couple of thousand sitting in a warehouse in Watford, which is a shame. They should have long ago been sold.
Yeah.
It was decided in the anniversary year. Was it the 50th anniversary? So last year or the previous year, I think it was. It was decided that all those books should be sold, but it didn't happen.
So let's get our hands on them. So everybody on here, share this. Let's check it. I myself, when I was checking Amazon, I'm getting myself a copy. So please do. And it's something like you're saying, Rancho Prabhu. It gives us that aspect, that dimension from those devotees. So many devotees you spoke to, but you put into in a story way. So that'll be such a nice read. So please, everybody, check it out. And I want to say also thank you to you for your dedication with the way diligently you have been helping with all the books that you've been writing, because a lot of these books are helping a lot of devotees around, especially when you talked about the Bhagavad-Gita, and how, and I'm trying to recall the name of the title.
Well, I became aware that many people over the years bought, willingly or unwillingly, Prabhupada's Bhagavad-Gita,
Yes.
And it tended for a lot of people to sit on the shelf. I've actually even spoken to Hare Krishna devotees who have not read the Bhagavad-Gita, not properly. And I understand that, because, getting into a really heavyweight book like that with Sanskrit everywhere, is not easy. You know, not everyone is inclined to that. Some people are very inclined to reading in depth, you know, scholarly books, but not everyone is. And of course, Prabhupada's voice is there, which is a real draw for some, but not for everyone. They're just not open. They're not ready. So I had taught for many years that we really do need a simple presentation of the Bhagavad-Gita as a way in, you know, just to open the door, to introduce somebody to the basic concepts. And so when I was sitting with that intention all through the 90s, I guess. It was in my mind a lot. And in the end, what I did was I drafted a version of chapter 2. And I sent it round to about a dozen friends, devotees, some, you know, people whose opinions I regarded, and said, what do you think? Do you think it should be done? Because I was hesitant. Obviously, it's sacred ground, you know, treading on sacred ground. But I got 100% encouragement. And then the final thing was I discovered something that Prabhupada had said. And actually, I'm going to show it to you. Because I'll get it.
While you find that, so this is the Bhagavad Gita, and it's called the Talks Between the Soul and God, published in 2011. So we just for everyone's information.
Okay, so then I discovered something that Prabhupada said, and I wrote it. How do we do this? I put it on the bottom of one of my favorite pictures of Prabhupada, and it says, this is from Bhagavad-Gita, Prabhupada says this, any commentary on the Gita following in the footsteps of Arjuna is real devotional service. So that's in the passage when Krishna says to Arjuna that because you are my devotee, you can understand what I'm teaching you. And Prabhupada gives his commentary that if you're not a devotee, you won't understand what Krishna's saying. So in the course of that commentary, he says, he makes this comment. So when I read that, I thought, that's my, confirmation to do this. And around the same time, out of the blue, I do have an agent occasionally who helps me get books published and so on. And she wrote to me, she said, Ranchor, I've got a publisher for you. Because I told her I wanted to do this Gita. She said, I found a publisher. She wants to publish your book. So this lady, she had a press called Godfield Press. And I went to her office in Marylebone, and I said, listen, the thing is, I've forgotten her name now, but lovely one. The thing is that, I'd love you to publish, of course, my Gita, but it's very devotional. I don't know if it'll, really fit. And she said, I love it, and I want it exactly as it is. she'd seen an excerpt. So she published the Gita originally in a sort of a picture edition with lots of lovely photographs. Then I got the copyright back, and I revised it, and then I produced this edition here.
There we go. There's the Bhagavad Gita. Talks between the God and soul. The soul
and God. A friend of mine told me, if you put talks between God and the soul, a lot of people are just straight away going to turn off when they see the word God first. If you put the soul and God, then I think the soul, okay, well, that's me. I'm the soul. And so I heard that, and it made sense. So the soul and God. And I kept it very simple, but hopefully true to Prabhupada. And anyway, the feedback which I've had since publishing that book, I think it has touched a point with many people, including Krishna devotees, many Krishna devotees, but also in the yoga world, people seem to like it. It's being used, it's being taught. There's courses around the world. So it doesn't sell in large quantities, but it keeps trickling out there, and so I'm very happy about that. Yeah.
So you can see so many. So on Amazon, everybody, if you want to see, just type in Ranchor Prime, Amazon, and you'll see all the books actually there. So that's the quickest way. And probably now, you know, if you got Prime, Amazon Prime, I like that. Then you'll probably get the next day. So check it out, please. And you know, it's been such a pleasure. And you know, an hour has gone so quick. We've only got not long at all. And I just want to say thank you so much for, you know, your introspection, the conversation today, and your realizations. It's really helped. I've been getting so many comments coming through.
If we're nearing the end, I would like to just say that often Prabhupada is somehow presented in our international movement, and rightly so, as an enormous sort of person to be adored, and slightly, I guess, there's a mood of sort of awe around Prabhupada. And many of my god brothers, you know, or my generation, the same, you know, to be in Prabhupada's presence could be quite frightening. You know, you don't know what he's going to say, or just he looks at you, and many devotees would say this, he can see inside my heart. And it, like, you know, it's a sort of, and I experienced that. However, I was very lucky in the sense that I did get the chance to sit in Prabhupada's personal company quite a few times. And I gradually, it took me 2 or 3 years, I began to realize just this wonderful sense of paternal friendship, you know, and such an affectionate, loving person. And no matter how poorly I may have undertaken my responsibilities, you know, there's no question I've been very short of the mark. But Prabhupada doesn't judge any of us. He is full of love. And that's why he teaches about a God who is full of love. And there's no question of forgiveness. Forgiveness is not required because, you know, it's just like if I have my own child and my child misbehaves, I don't really have to forgive my child. Not a decent parent doesn't, because you just love them regardless. No matter what they do, you'll always love them. That is the nature of love. It doesn't judge. It simply accepts. And so Prabhupada is like that. And I want everyone to know that you can have a very affectionate sense of relationship with Prabhupada. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So this is the reason we do these Prabhupada memoirs, because it helps us to get the realizations from his direct disciples such as yourself, and also to help us understand the mood of Srila Prabhupada in a more intimate way.
This is my favorite picture. This is Prabhupada sitting on the floor in his room in Bury Place. And I sat with him, you know, with 2 or 3 others on the floor, chatting and laughing. Prabhupada had a great sense of humor. So I treasure that picture. And that of acceptance.
Thank you so much. And I've just had Aura Gross. She said, wow, long time not seen. I think he's talking about yourself. Was Temple President, 1986.
That's true. I was there.
So, and she's of course in Americas, in America. So thank you so much, Aura, for joining today. Really appreciate that. And thank you everybody for joining. I think it's been so nice having you, Prabhu, today and sharing with us. And hopefully it's enlivened everyone's love even further for Srila Prabhupada. And finally, check these books out. When the Sun Shines, Hinduism and Ecology, of course. And, you know, a great gift. Christmas is coming as well. You may know people. Bhagavad-Gita talks between the soul and God. So all of these are on Amazon, and you don't have to deliver them yourself. You can just get it on Prime. So check them out, please. And on that basis, Hare Krishna to everyone, and thank you so much again, Ranchor Prabhu, for your association, your valuable time.
Thank
And
you.
we look forward to hopefully seeing you online again at some time in the future. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.